So thank you for joining us, Candice. Firstly, well done. You're studying and you're working.
And I've got 2 kids.
And you have got, okay, so there's no excuse for anyone.
I hope not.
So how are you managing? I mean, that's definitely another topic that we can discuss there. How are you managing? I'm going to actually ask you to position yourself there because there's a shadow on your face.
Is that fine?
Yeah, just to maybe, so we can get the best of you.
Is this good?
No, don't move.
Okay.
I want to get the best of you.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, are you comfortable?
I'm good.
Because I could see the light was blinding you.
Yeah, no, this is good. Thank you.
Okay, so as a working mom anyway, how are you managing to cope? 2 children, studying.
A tween and a teen, which is special, yeah?
Tween and a teen. Okay, I think a lot of us can relate to how challenging it is. But on top of that, you're studying.
Yeah.
So how are you able to manage that and reduce your stress and still be quite as vivacious as you are?
I think for me, if we take the time...
I'm going to ask you to move that a bit closer to you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Much better. Okay, good.
Okay, I feel like Janet Jackson. Like,
you look like her. You look quite...
I will not quit my day job, okay? I think for me, the more time you spend thinking about how to get things done, the less time you're doing things. So I think as a mom, as an executive, as a researcher doing my PhD, the first practical thing I needed to do is to understand who is in my support network and putting my hand up for help. To say that, you know what, if it's going to mean I need an au pair, I'm going to need a nanny, an aunt, a granny, the dad, whoever needs to be involved needs to be in place. They need to support.
So Janet, now you feel like her.
Yeah, that's better. I think we have to be practical about it as women. And once you've made up your mind what it is you want to achieve and what you want to do with your life, that's when things just happen and you get up and you get going and you do things. So I chose a PhD because it's a passion of mine to understand why women's not making it into senior management, what's causing us to fall out of the management pipeline, and what I can do as an executive in human resources to start having those conversations around the boardroom table, around who's the talent that's coming through, who are the individuals that's not at the forefront of our minds because they're not on the golf course, they are not in the pub having the beers. They're probably the ones staying late, doing the work, writing the reports. And those are talents for the future. And for me, I think as a female executive, it's important to identify who's those talents and how do we advocate for them to give them the right level of exposure and experience to develop their careers. But short answer to a long story, I think you need to be practical, you need to be driven by passion, and this is why I'm doing a PhD. But at the same time, you also need to be realistic with yourself. So you need to have the conversations around, if I'm going to be a mom, there's certain sacrifices that I need to make in light of my career. So I might not be at all the netball games and all the hockey games. But when you do spend time with your kids, it's quality time and it actually matters.
Sure, I'm like, I breathed quite heavily there because it's a challenge because you're trying to fulfill your personal goals in terms of your career, but you're also wanting to get that balance between what it means to be a good mom. And I think what you said earlier on was so poignant and powerful was for us to ask for assistance, to ask for help, and to get that support system going. So do you think, though, women in leadership roles is not something that we see very often? Is it, do you think, because of that? Because we are mothers? Because we are seen to be, as the weaker sex? Or what do you think it is? Why are there not enough women in leadership roles?
I think there's a number of issues. And I think the macro issue is that it's a systemic issue. Up until about 50, 60 years ago, women were not allowed to go to university, we were not allowed to study, we were not allowed to be in certain occupations. If we drill it down a little bit closer to home and we think about South Africa, by virtue of being a PDI, by virtue of being a female, there were certain functional disciplines that we were just not allowed into. So if you think about how the world of work and how economies has developed over time, you will find that your male cohorts would have had more exposure, they would have developed their careers more. And what we find today is that some of those systemic issues still exist. So women will choose careers where they probably have a little bit more flexibility, administrative roles, so that they can be home when it's time to make the dinner, or they can take extended leave to spend time with the kids. But we find a new generation of women that's saying, I want to make a choice. I don't want the system to decide for me. I want to choose what's the functional discipline that I want to follow. I want to make a choice about what I do with my body. And I think with the advancement of technology, there's more options than ever for women to make those choices, number one. And number two, I've never been around a boardroom table where someone's saying, I'm not going to select this candidate because they're female. The first thing we look at is, do you have the right level of exposure and experience and qualifications? And unfortunately, because of the choices women make along their careers, they're just not in the pool when it comes to selection.
Okay, so it's not specifically because of their gender, it's because of their exposure.
Yeah.
So when you talk about exposure, what do you mean specifically?
When I talk about exposure, I'm specifically talking about... Are we having a Janet moment again? Okay. Sorry.
We want to make sure that we can hear Candice.
Just don't mess up my hair. Yeah, there we go. So I think when we talk about exposure, it's important that we understand that, and I'm just going to go a little bit back into my research, right? We've heard about the theory on glass ceilings. So there's a certain level in the management hierarchy that women's not breaking through into. Over the past few years, we've seen that women is making it into the C-suite, and we have in fact broken the glass ceiling. But what's coming out of research now is the glass wall. And the glass wall is saying that the experience and exposure that we've had as women is parallel to our male counterparts, but it's not sufficient for us to branch over into the actual strategic decision-making roles into the C-suite. So you almost have this sensation that you've made it to the top, but there's actually a barrier between the actual key decision makers in business and who's driving the economies and the woman you find on those executive committees. So I think when it comes to getting the right level of experience and exposure, women need to think when they get out of school, not when they're in middle management, what is their core inherent skills and where they want to develop their career to. And once they've made those choices, you need to identify sponsors. Sponsors are those individuals that are in the key decision-making roles. They are in the networks. They are on the golf courses. And they are the individuals that will know about roles or opportunities or projects that's coming up, because inevitably the best person needs to get the role. And how we assess that is based on the exposures you've had, the projects you've worked in, the qualifications you hold.
Okay, so what do you think women have? Once again, I'm not trying to create an us and them scenario, but what can women bring in terms of value to a leadership role based on her gender?
First of all, we are pretty.
Oh, okay.
We are easy on the eye. You know, I think I've been asked this question often, and we know that even based on the research, there isn't real biological or intellectual differences or cognitive differences between the brain of a man and a woman. But there is one key difference, and that's that we still bear the children. And I think with that innate ability to nurture, to care, to be an integrator, to be a support, the world of work has changed. We don't want to be led. Societies don't want to be led by dictators, people that's not interested in your opinion. And we've seen it with the advent of social media. Everyone has an opinion about everything. And I think the key differentiator that women brings beyond their intrinsic ability to nurture, to be sociable, to build relationships, to have empathy, is also our ability to support each other. And oftentimes to look at things integrated and not just the business outcomes in itself. So we create value for our shareholders, but are we internalizing that value in the organizations and the society at large? And I think what I've seen with some of the women that's coming out of my research, there's definitely a real sense of empathy and of wanting to do the right thing, not just for the organization, but for all parties involved.
Okay, wonderful. So if you could give anybody here a bit of a tip on how we can identify strengths in women, how we can get them to break through that glass wall, what do we need to develop in order to recognize the strengths in others so that other women can flourish, if not ourselves?
You know, I think for me, the one thing that I will consistently say is that women need to be more courageous about their careers.
Courageous. Okay?
You need to have the courage to go for the opportunities, and you need to eyeball the cost of going for those opportunities. Because if you don't make those choices up front early on, the system will make the choices for you. And you'll be sidelined and not get the opportunities you want.
What do you think is holding women back, though? Where's this coming from? Is it learned behavior? Is it something they were told when they were younger? How do we break through that belief system, really, of what it means to be a successful woman?
And I'm going to draw on my research here a little bit again, just to explain why I'm saying it. So at a university in the States, they did a study around understanding the socialization and the impact of Disney animations over a period of time.
Yeah.
And what they saw with this cohort is that from an early age, and I'm talking about the Disney animations of 10, 15, 20 years ago, you have the frail, fragile princess, and you have the valiant prince. And the first thing we flip on when we're working mums is Cartoon Network or Disney Channel, and the impact of shaping the brain of a young girl. We're assuming, because the research is still ongoing, that those social images actually impacts how we show up in the workplace. We're waiting for our male counterparts to come in, to save the day, and we almost socialize to be this frail, fragile individuals. So if you fast forward that a little bit into 2019, what I found in my research is that women are their own worst enemies because we want to get it all right all the time, be the mom, be the wife, be the soccer mom, and unfortunately they suffer burnout. So you need to make those choices around where am I going to apply my skills and what risks am I willing to take, and where am I going to have to make the sacrifice to realize my career goals.
I think you just touched on something that was so interesting for me was I tried not calling my daughter a princess. Yeah, I'm one of those moms because I didn't want her to have this delusional reality of what life is about. And it's a cute, endearing, that's cute.
Yeah.
But if I had to continue to buy her crowns, buy her pink tutus, buy her, do you know what I mean? I'm indoctrinating her to a degree. And there's no judgment on anybody who calls their children princess. Yeah. What I'm saying now is that we are actually disabling as you said, in terms of expecting this knight in shining armor to come and save the day. And in a way, we're disempowering them.
Yeah.
And then when they stand up and be counted, we say they've been too aggressive. So there's this duality, this like incongruence in terms of the messages we are giving our young children. Yeah. So I think it starts with us.
I think it starts with us, but I don't want it to sound like, I'm a feminist, let's go and burn our bras. And,
neither do I. Like it's not about being a feminist.
It's about making deliberate choices and not just being products of what the system dictates. So are we choosing actively what our children consume from an early age when it comes to media? Are we making choices for ourselves when it comes to choices around our bodies, our education, the roles that we take? And because inequality is very systematic, it's a system that upholds inequality, people's not stopping and asking those questions deliberately anymore, having the conversations. So I've got a daughter as well, and I have a son, and you get to the point where you have to socialize them differently, and I have to give my daughter more support because I know that the system in which we live is unequally yoked.
Yeah, it's definitely, we almost treat them differently because of the environment, but I think what you're saying is essential for us to be conscious.
Yeah.
And for us to, in this space, have these conversations with each other, maybe go for coffee and say, so how do you think we could maybe change this pandemic in a way where women are thinking that we are less than based on. And I'm sounding like a feminist, am I? I'm quite passionate about it because I feel like, and I love that you said on a biological level there isn't much difference.
There isn't.
Okay, so I haven't read that research and I think it's really interesting.
So the biology is around our cognitive abilities between males and females. We obviously know that there is chemical differences in terms of the levels of estrogen and testosterone in our systems. But that's not the point. The point is that do we have the smartest brains making the decisions if we don't have a balance of men and women? And today we can't answer that question because the scales is tipped towards men.
So how do we get those scales balanced?
I think for me, the only way to get those scales balanced is to make sure that we create opportunities for women to start developing their careers. But women needs to be their own advocates. Because men is not going to, they've been running these systems for hundreds of years and economies. They're not just going to step aside and say, what do you think we should do? You need to be not forceful, but you need to be resolute. And you need to be determined about what it is and the contribution that you want to make.
It's quite interesting when you say that, because sometimes if women are forceful and assertive, it gets misconstrued as many other things.
Yeah.
So how do you think we can come across as self-confident, assertive, and get taken seriously?
I think for me it boils down to building relationships authentically. So if people really know who you are and they really know that you care, you can almost get away with anything, not everything, right? But I find that women, we're so busy working, building in our little cocoons, we don't lift our heads up and take the time to build the relationships. And at the end of the day, I think we're in a stage now in society where people want authentic, credible leaders. And I don't want to be led by someone that got it right all the time. Because there's something about getting it wrong, getting the lesson, picking yourself up, and starting over again. And there's a level of leadership resilience and credibility. And I want to be led by someone that got it wrong once or twice, not all the time, right? And I think as women, we fear failure. We fear getting it wrong. And men on the other end is like, let's go, right? So I think for me, at the end of the day, we should have less conversations in our own heads as women, and we should become our own advocates.
And how do we support each other as women? What should we do to build each other up?
I think the woman-to-woman management theory is still very much alive. The Queen Bee theory that essentially says that female line manager or executives actually makes it more difficult for other women. And sadly, in my research, it's been coming up as well. So one of the dimensions of the research is looking at your line manager relationship. So when you report it into a man, when you report it into a female, what has been the differences? And inevitably, I find the examples of other female managers not managing their profiles or the individual appropriately. So I think it might sound strange, but I think as women, we need to be a bit more accommodating towards each other, and understand that the table's big enough for all of us. I don't need to hold on to my position. It's okay for me to build succession. It's okay for 2 or 3 other people to be better at what I'm doing. That's in my team. And I think you need to get to that point of self-confidence and self-realization to say, you know what, it's okay if someone in my team's better and they're a woman. I'm going to give them the opportunity to present. I'm going to give them the opportunity to take the lead on the project.
Sure, because I'm listening to you here and I'm thinking about all the other speakers that we've spoken to and interviewed, and there's once again this theme about connecting authentically, communicating, but the reality is people are scared.
Yeah.
There's that fear that holds us back from connecting. So how do we break through that fear, that barrier, to be our true selves? I mean, for you, you're a dynamic lady. Have you ever had any hindrances in your career or challenges that you overcame, and maybe you can give us a tip on how you did that?
I think it boils down to courage again, right? So the speaker this morning spoke about bullying in the workplace and you should avoid contact. I'm like, wow, someone should have given me this lecture 15 years ago. Because usually this is when you engage, right? So I think the obstacles that I've faced in my career, when you come from a previously disadvantaged background like I have, there's nothing further that you can fall further from. Right? So for me, the only way out of poverty was through education. And I had to make a choice early on in my life that these are the circumstances in which I'm born in a township, but this is not going to define who I am. Nobody had to come and sit down and have a conversation with me.
Sure.
I just had to look up every day in the township and see what's happening with the youth and unemployment, etc. So there's definitely an element of resilience. There's definitely an element of having an internal locus of control. You're able to manage your own destiny and your own future. But at the end of the day, the only thing that got me through my setbacks is mentoring relationships. So when you come from a previously disadvantaged background, I'm the first graduate in my family, the first executive. There's no one else that you can have these conversations with. So I had to be very deliberate early on in my career to identify mentors. That's male. Some of them are female. Some of them grew up privileged. But I had the ability to identify that they have a skill, and I can tap into that skill. And you need to be humble, and you need to go and say, actually, I need help. I need to understand how to navigate corporate politics. I need to understand how to be a mom and an executive at the same time. So for me, essentially, it's around, yes, there is self-belief, but no one's an island. You have to build a network of support, and you need to be deliberate about the relationships you build.
Okay, so if I come and knock on your door and ask you for help, will you give me help?
Of course.
Absolutely. And I think it's just so wonderful that you acknowledge that you saw it from when you were very young, and you had the courage and the confidence to say, help me out, and now I can be the best version of myself, and you can pay it forward and help all of us to get to that next level. So truly inspiring. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.